What's going on here? Oh, yes, I remember those. Yes, Wimbledon, wasn't it? Hold on.
Was he about 78, 79?
No, dear, no. 85 this year.
Oh, my God, don't tell me that. What are we doing? We're still cooking on gas.
He's real. He doesn't think, oh, I'm going to meet some journalists, I must rush home and put a suit on. And he's walked into a press tour or something.
Ebulliently!
With the big wellies on.
Exuberant!
All his fishing gear.
Mountebankery!
I like that.
From none other than Mr. Bernard Cribbins!
Bernard who?
All right, said Fred. Have to take the door off. Need more space to shift the so-and-so.
I mean, when I get my builders in, and I do all that, I go, right, said Fred. You know, oh, yeah, you do.
You take this, that's an order, Doctor. Take the gun and save your life.
When I was 8, Bernard Cribbins was the most famous man in the world.
Wonderful man. Oh, him. Yes.
Bernard has had singles in the top 10 and was also the oldest Doctor Who girl there has ever been. I don't think you can really pretend that nobody knows who he is.
Never. I remember him. Yes, he still owes me money.
It's amazing to think that Bernard Cribbins has been in this volatile business for over 70 years. Starting in rep at Oldham, arriving in the West End in the mid-50s, having 2 massive record hits in the early 60s, appearing on Jackanory over 100 times, creating the voices for the Wombles and starring in films like The Railway Children and musicals such as Guys and Dolls at the National Theatre. And he's still very much working. So what's been the most recent job that you've been doing?
I've been working for CBeebies channel, and we've done 25 shows, a character called Old Jack, and it's called Old Jack's Boat, and it's basically storytelling, a bit like Jackanory, with me facing camera and telling these lovely stories that were written specially, and it gets away from what we've seen a lot of on children's TV is very fast editing and noise and everything else. This is very gentle, looking straight into camera, talking to one child and saying, do you know what happened when I went out with my dog the other day? You don't? Well, I'll tell you. And immediately you pull them in and you've got them, you know. You'll have to watch it, Martin, because I think it's just your cup of tea.
And who's the series producer?
The producer was Dominic MacDonald, and we had a lot of fun together. And then one little voice said,
I believe you.
It was Pip, the tailor's son, bright red hair, still wearing his pyjamas.
Bernard started telling stories on Jackanory in the 1960s, and I think his storytelling is as wonderful now as it was 40 years ago. He has that ability to pull in the audience and hold them in the palm of his hand. The magic is unfaded. He's got a twinkle in his eye.
And the Moon Maiden cried out, it's working.
Now, it all started very, very differently.
Yes.
Did you come from a theatrical family?
No, my mother was a weaver in a cotton mill in Oldham, where I was born. My dad was, well, he had a variety of jobs. He was a property repairer, he was a plumber's mate, he was a handyman of sorts. He also sang in the church choir, and he had a great interest in amateur dramatics, so I think that was the seed that was sown into me. And I started at the theatre in Oldham when I was 14. It was the 4th of January 1943 was my first engagement. Prior to that, I'd done something in a little drama festival when I was about 12, and the producer then, a delightful, lovely man called Douglas Emery, spotted something in me and asked my parents if any little boys' parts came up subsequently, would I be allowed to go and play them. My dad discussed it with me. I said yes, please, because I knew I was going to be paid. And I did a couple of things while I was still at school. And then leaving school at 13, I was offered a job and just did it, you know.
So the job was as a deputy stage manager?
Assistant stage manager.
Assistant stage manager.
And any little boys' parts that came up. But, I mean, assistant stage manager meant carrying furniture, cleaning furniture, sweeping up, and generally learning what I was going to do, like watching people when they were prompting and watching the actors work. You could say I'm an actor by osmosis. Osmosis? Is that the word? I think it is, yeah.
And of course they've still got very strong memories of you in Oldham.
I'm not surprised.
And the current historian, or the man who seems to keep the records up there, is David Rustage, who's currently the front-of-house manager at the Oldham Coliseum.
He was a trailblazer for the child actor who made good and put Oldham on the map as a theatre town. I was looking through the archive and I found this programme for 1944. And as I was browsing through the programme, I discovered that a Bernard Cribbins was featured in several various episodes of Shakespeare, and perhaps the most notoriously famous of the lot, Macbeth, Act 3, Scene 3, he played a servant, and he'd be about 14 or 15 years of age.
And also, of course, this is the time of weekly rep, which is hard to imagine now. Yeah. How did weekly rep work?
Well, the man in charge had a great big whip and used to lash people. No, I mean, you did 50 plays a year, which is criminal when you think about it.
Unbelievable.
And I was doing, I think, nearly a 70-hour week at the age of 14. What happened to Ken Livingstone? He should have had a word about this. Oh, yes.
Well, this is where you met people like Dora Bryan. I mean, Oldham produced...
Dora was the juvenile character lady at Oldham when I joined the company. She always swears that I arrived in the winter there, January, with newspaper wrapped round my legs. It's totally untrue. My mother was furious when she heard that. Yeah. But I think I was in short pants still. Yeah.
And we had a wonderful moment, didn't we, about 4 or 5 years ago, when you and Dora and Roy Barraclough, another Oldham veteran, gathered together and we did a plays written by Jimmy Chin.
Yes, also.
An Oldham-based writer.
That's right, yes.
Yes.
Yes, Old Home Week, that, wasn't it? Yeah. And a very good little play.
It was indeed, and it's called Looks Like Rain.
Oh, we never had much to laugh about in this house. Talk about gloomy. We used to sit around that wireless when we were kids. Do you remember listening to Tommy Hanley?
No, he was funny.
Yeah, but we don't have laughed, not out loud. My mum used to say, "You two, be quiet. Laughing will waken your dad."
Hang on, I'll open the curtains. Let a bit of light in.
Now, what about Eric Sykes? Wasn't he also...
Eric was there, I think, as an ASM and acting when I met him, actually, in 1949, and I'd gone back to Oldham on my demob leave, and I was introduced to Eric, he being an Oldham lad as well, and he said, "What are you going to do? Are you coming back here?" I said, "I'm not sure. I might think about going into variety." He said, "I've got an act for you." And there and then he started doing a one-legged darts player, which is, I mean, standing in the middle of the street in Oldham on one leg, going double top and wobbling about. And that was my introduction to Eric. And I saw much, much more of him many years later. We became great friends and played golf together, and he was great fun.
Now, when you had to go to do your national service, you were at Oldham at that point.
I was, yes.
And you went into the parachute regiment.
No, I went and did my basic training at Altrincham, near in Cheshire there. And then a young man came around with a red beret and lieutenant's pips on his shoulder and said, "It's a wonderful life in the parachute regiment, la 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 la." But the cruncher was that you got 2 and 6 a day extra when you were jumping, you see. Anyway, I had the most marvellous time, wouldn't have joined anything else. Yeah.
And where did you go? Where did you serve?
I went to Aldershot to do my training. We did our jumping up at Upper Hayford in Oxfordshire, and then we were shipped out to Palestine in 1947.
Was this quite a violent period? I mean, were you
It was indeed, yes. There was a lot of noise and bullets and bombs and boobies and things. I had a very pretty incident one evening. I was standing on guard early in the morning, and one of our sergeants, who was called Mountain, known as Rocky Mountain, he came round, he said, "We've just had an order come through. You're not to return fire unless you're hit." I said, "What?" He said, "You heard." And at that very moment, I swear this is true, there was a huge smack, and a sniper had a go at us, and he hit the parapet below us, between us. So we both dropped down behind the parapet, and he just looked at me and said, "Don't forget, not unless you're hit," and crawled away. And I thought it was lovely. Good line, wouldn't it?
When you finished your national service,
Yes.
was your ambition to immediately go back into the theatre, or did you consider any other alternatives?
No, I didn't really. I mean, I went back home to my hometown and home, and it seemed sensible to try and pick up where I'd left off, as it were. So I rejoined Oldham Rep as an assistant again. You used to get a prop list every week, and you would have various strange things to find. We were doing a play, I think, called Lot's Wife, and my prop list included a goat, a live goat. And I said, you know, where do I get a goat from? They said, well, we've rung a farm up in Moorside, which is like a bus ride out of... And I used to have to go every day, pick up this goat on a lead and take it on a bus. And you had to take it upstairs, because in those days, if you had a dog, you had to go upstairs, right? And I used to say, one and a goat. And pay for the goat. Yeah, and I think it was twopence for me and a penny for the goat or something.
How did the big break come, where you suddenly end up in the West End in 1956?
We were married by then. Jill and I were married. We were married in 55, and I was working at Hornchurch, and we were doing a production of St. Joan, and a production was being mounted of Comedy of Errors. Lionel Harris was directing and was looking for someone to play the Dromios, the two servants. Someone in the company knew somebody else who said, go and see St. Joan, because there's an actor called Bernard Cribbins who's singing and dancing, la la la. He came to see it. I was offered the job, and the next thing was I was rehearsing at the Arts Theatre, and that was me straight away, my first job in the West End, a musical, followed by another musical.
And you also appeared in Revue, which is now largely gone, hasn't it? What was Revue?
Revue in those days was a series of sketches and little songs and vignettes and whatever. I think we did one of the last ones with a thing called And Another Thing, which we did at the Fortune Theatre. We were followed into that in the early 60s, 61, something like that, by Beyond the Fringe, which changed the shape of the Revue, the traditional Revue, which was a bit sort of end of pier and sentimentality and everything else.
There were obviously a key number of actors who appeared regularly in Revue. People like Ron Moody.
Yes, like a lot of West End people working at the same time. You would see each other on a bus or whatever. You say, hello, darling, how's business? You know, how you doing? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we're coming off at the end of the week. Oh, that's a shame. You know, off you go.
Like if you were doing a play, and it would be rather nice to see Bernard coming through the door and say, hello, Bernard, what are you doing here? He'd say, I just saw your play. I thought you were brilliant. You liar. We were part of the team, the crowd, and I think Bernard and I have always been in the same ilk. We're related. We're clowns. That's what clowns are, tragicomic actors.
So would you say you were a tragicomic actor? It's like the list of players.
I don't know what
Hamlet.
I am, really. I call myself a character actor, which is what Ron Moody is, and we've got so many good character actors in England. You can do the funny stuff, and you can do the, you know, the pathetic and the tear-jerking stuff as well. It's what character actors do. You're not the tall, pretty one who stands there and gets the girl, but it's very useful to have him around when the other one's gone off with the girl.
Another actor I know you've worked with is Barry Cryer. He seems to work with everybody, doesn't he?
Barry Cryer I worked with, he was writing stuff for the Revue, I think we've mentioned already, And Another Thing, and he wrote a sketch which I did, which was absolutely knockout. And then many years later, we worked together on The Good Old Days, and Barry used to write a double act for us, which had a little song and a lot of rubbish as well.
Paroxysmal
And I don't know how we got through it without wetting ourselves.
purveyors of pyromanic pandemonium.
We had such a good time doing it.
Fire eaters.
No, he's a very clever writer, lovely performer, and great buddy when you're on stage.
Les Flambeaux!
First impressions of me and Bernard Cribbins is laughing. He said something to me, probably insulting me, knowing him, so I jovially insulted him back. And that was it. Yeah, we've always had a sort of telepathic thing.
Go on, light them.
How can I light them? These matches, they're all dead.
They won't be alone if you don't get on with it.
Well, no, it's not my fault, Barry. I mean, I got these from the digs. You see, it's Mrs. Bookrod, you know, she puts them back in the box when she struck them.
May I remind you, we are a fire-eating act.
Well, I know that. I'm in it.
You're right in it. Kind of a fire-eating act without fire. It's like having a singer who can't sing.
Well, there's a few of them about, Barry.
When we finished up doing a double act on the good old days, it was great. You can't cater for that, the chemistry. I hope he agrees. It was just an instinct. You know, he would start messing about. I was the straight man in the act, really. But if he messed about, I'd go with him. You knew what was happening. It was like reading each other's minds. You just blended in. It was great.
I must apologise. I'm saddled with an incompetent.
Hey, my Uncle Arthur, he was like that.
So instead... Like what?
Well, you know, my Uncle Arthur, he was like what you said.
Incompetent.
Or incompetent, yes.
It's very true, that, actually. It doesn't happen with everybody. I think, you know, you find a like-minded soul on stage, and it does work. No, it was lovely working with Barry. He wrote some lovely stuff for us, and then he would stand there and do his funny Scotsman with his kilt and everything.
You've had a long association, of course, with Ray Cooney, the playwright and theatre impresario.
We've grown up together, really, yes. Yes, lovely man, Ray, yeah. He wrote Not Now, Darling with John Chapman, and I did that for a whole year with Donald Sinden. No, it was great fun, great fun. And to play that sort of quality play to packed houses the whole time is very gratifying.
I realised very early on in Not Now, Darling that Bernie happens to be a really good actor and wonderful in my kind of comedies because he's real. Bernie isn't somebody who seeks publicity. I don't think he's ever craved to be a star.
I haven't.
Bernie is a great one for dissecting the piece. You know, what do you think's going with that? We used to get a really nice laugh there. Now it's just a chuckle. What do you think is going wrong? And we discuss that. And Bernie is great. He will have done his homework, and he turns up what we call DLP, which stands for Dead Letter Perfect.
Yeah, well, that's all very well for him to say DLP, but if you didn't turn up DLP, you'd be in trouble with Ray, because he'd get a big stick and smack your bum with it. No, I think it's... he's proved that his dialogue is correct, it's tight, it's concise and everything else. So, you know, it is your responsibility to produce that on stage, yeah.
And because of this, I presume, this relationship and your sheer enjoyment of working with Ray Cooney, that you've kept going back, and you've done, I think 4 times, Run for Your Wife.
Goodness, have I really? Yeah. I know I did it first in Australia, and then after Australia, where Ray and I went out to prove the play, I suppose, and then I came back and we started rehearsing again with Richard Bryars, and we opened the Theatre of Comedy at the Shaftesbury Theatre in 1983.
And we were doing another matinee in the summertime, which is very hot, that one, and we were waiting in the wings, and the lights had gone down. And suddenly one of the pass doors opposite, suddenly some idiot opened it and banged it. And as you could just see it, you saw this blinding sunshine. I said, what was it? He said, that, Bryars, he said, is life. And we're not in it. We're in the darkness. It was absolutely true. We had to occasionally, Ray Cooney used to come around and give us a real royal rollicking and say, you really mustn't laugh. Laughing and larking about, we did a lot of that.
Dickie and I had a lot of fun doing that play, and I must say he was a great guy to work with, and he'll be very sadly missed. Rest easy, sir, rest easy.
Not long after the Comedy of Errors, 1956...
My goodness, we're going back there, are we? Go on, then.
You get your first films. In 1957-58, you worked with Peter Sellers.
First one was Two-Way Stretch, which we did down at Shepperton Studios, and I think we started the first day of shooting with the first day of the script, which is extremely unusual because you're usually out of sequence the whole time. David Lodge, Peter Sellers, and myself in a cell together, prisoners, and Lionel Jeffries, who was the warder coming in, and we had such a lot of laughs on that. It was wonderful. And I thought Peter was terrific in those. He was one of the chaps then, you know.
Now, Lenny, get down here and see what them Drainsley do.
I'm not going down here. You must be potty if you think you're going to get me down here.
Lenny? Lenny? Come here. Have you forgotten what your dear mum said to you last visiting day?
What?
About how you never try to break out like the rest of your relatives? Have you forgotten that, Lenny? Have you forgotten it?
No.
Listen, you're doing this for your mum. For your mum. And for the honour of the Price family, Lenny. Now get down there. You never know, you might come up covered in glory.
And that was directed by Robert Day.
And I did another one with him, Wrong Arm of the Law, and I think that was one of Peter's best performances ever. He was playing this Cockney geezer who was a criminal, but also running a fur salon or dress salon, and he used to switch from Cockney to a very good French accent in a split second. I thought he was smashing in that. No, we had loads and loads of fun.
Don't you start accusing me.
Do you deny, then, that some of your mob have been dressing up as coppers?
What are you on about? Look, 3 of my lads was clobbered yesterday by 3 of your hooligans dressed up like rozzers.
Most of them are not hooligans, and furthermore, they do not dress up as coppers.
Don't give me that. Slow down, for God's sake. Where do you think you are? Brands Hatch?
Peter was extraordinary to watch and to learn from, because I did a scene with him. I can't remember what it was now particularly, but I do remember the feeling I had that he wasn't doing a great deal when we were actually playing the scene together. And then I saw the rushes with his close-ups and everything else, utterly different. And he was playing it for the camera in particular, which is the medium in which he was working, you know. He knew exactly what he was doing. And anything smaller would have been lost. Anything larger would have been too much. It was absolutely, brilliantly spot on, you know. Terrific technician.
That film, of course, was directed by Clive Owen. Did you learn anything when you worked with Alfred Hitchcock on the film Frenzy?
I learnt a lot of new limericks because he was a great fan of the limerick.
Do you remember any?
Not that I can let you know over the air, as they say. But it just happened one day. I was sitting next to him in a chair, and we'd been discussing the scene that was coming up, and I happened to run off a limerick, and he said, "Oh," and the next day he brought in a book of limericks. He was potty about them, but he was very interesting to see working as a director, because he didn't seem to move out of his chair. Mind you, he was quite an old gentleman the time I worked with him, and he had hand-picked technicians around him. And one scene I did with Anna Massey where we had to come towards camera, and the camera followed us and went up the stairs, and Mr. Hitchcock never moved out of the chair, but at the end of it, cut. He said, "Camera, fine, sir, yes. Sound, yes, yes, fine, sir, yes. Lighting, okay, yes, fine. Print it." And that was it. He relied on the answer from his technicians, and if they said it was okay, you know. He'd set it up and it worked perfectly.
Listen, you took hell of a chance, didn't you, spending the night with a murderer?
How do you know I spent the night with anyone?
Now, come off it. You took his clothes to him, you didn't come home, it stands to reason.
Why don't you mind your own bleeding business?
Don't you talk to me like that, girl. I was worried about you. I thought you might be next.
Bernard, here's the film historian Matthew Sweet talking about Frenzy.
Vicious film, a nasty film, a brilliant film, but a film about sexual atrocity. He plays a pub landlord, and a landlord who is clearly sexually harassing his staff, but he uses a sort of coarse, nasty language that's really shocking to hear it coming out of his mouth.
Stuck your rotten job right up your jack. Come back, you! Oh, balls!
I want to say that Bernard Cribbins is a consummate character actor, but there's much more to him than that. He somehow seems bigger than all the parts that he's played. He somehow managed to work his way into all of our lives, so that he almost feels like a kind of family member that we don't really have.
One of the films you were in was She, with Ursula Andress.
I remember him, Ursula Andress. A lovely fella.
Legendary lady.
Yes.
And Peter Cushing.
Peter, yes, I was playing Peter Cushing's Batman, servant, in other words. We filmed some of that in Israel, down at the bottom end in the Negev desert. And I remember Peter and I used to have a competition every day to see how many different birds we could spot, both being bird watchers. And the other thing with him, I'd taken my snorkeling gear along because I knew I'd been there before with a film with David Niven. And I thought, good, time off, go swimming, you see. Peter had never been underwater with a snorkeling thing. And I talked to him about this, and he said, "Oh, yes, I'd love to do it." You know, very physical, very happy to go and have a go, good swimmer. And we dive down. I've shown him what to do, put the mask on properly. We go down, and I point out this fish underwater, and he starts talking to me underwater. He totally entranced by the whole thing and started to say how wonderful this is, Bernard. My goodness, just look. But he didn't think that he got a snorkel in his mouth, and lovely man.
Not the Peter Cushing we normally think of.
No, Peter Cushing and bird watching and doing silly music hall songs and things like that. Quite unusual from that sort of, Professor whatever he was called, Frankenstein or something. Yeah.
And of course it's around this time that you also get involved with the Carry On films and the director Gerald Thomas.
I did indeed, yes. I did 3 altogether. Carry On Jack, Carry On Spying, and then the last rather sad one, Carry On Columbus, which I think probably was the last Carry On ever.
And you met on the Carry On the young Barbara Windsor.
Yes, she wasn't young. She was only 12 at the time. Yeah. Yes, her first one was Carry On Spying. Yeah, and Barbara was on that. And we became great buddies. She's great fun.
I'm sure Bernard's the same as me. He didn't want fame. He just liked acting, singing, appearing, showing off a bit. That's all he wanted. And I was trying to think about him, and I think, yes, he's the one person in this business that I know that just gets on with it and then goes fishing. That's the way to do it, isn't it?
Trainee Agent Harold Crump, sir.
Number?
04733, sir.
You look like the sort of man who could take care of yourself in a fight. You done any judo?
Well, yes, as a matter of fact, I have, Mr. Simpkins. I was Southern Counties champion for 4 years running.
Really?
Yes, and I always used my own counters, little red ones. I used to shake those dice and whip them.
Judo, not ludo, you fool.
I'm sorry, sir.
Trainee Agent Daphne Honeybutt, sir.
Number?
382235.
Have you had any experience?
Oh, yes, a little.
When the makeup's off and he leaves the studio, he leaves Bernard the actor, comedian, singer, bloody can do it all in the studio.
Is Barbara right? Do you leave it all in the studio? Go home and relax?
I think very often I did, yes. But, if you'd had a dodgy performance that night or the audience wasn't very good, then you might think, what went wrong, go back to Ray Cooney, revising and whatever. No, but generally, once you've finished work, you get in the car and go home, don't you?
And in the next programme, we can share your memories of working with George Martin, of appearing on Jackanory, and in a whole raft of films, television and radio programmes.
I look forward to that. I'd love you to tell me what I was doing in all those years, because most of it is lost in the mists of time.
It is the blow. And that's that.
You ready, Mr. Cribbins?
What? Oh, right, Johnny. Okay. Oh, just a minute. Right.
When I first met Bernard Cribbins, I walked into a pub where David Tennant and Kylie Minogue were doubled over with laughter because Bernard Cribbins had just pulled a rubber chicken out of a suitcase.
He has all that twinkle about him, and all that warmth, and all that sort of magic. So I was thrilled and slightly starstruck that we got him on Doctor Who.
Nice little bit of the old Doctor flim-flam sort of thing.
It's a bit like stuffing Jack-in-a-Box into a box, and then all he does is jump straight out. He's unpredictable and delightful because of it.
To have a childhood hero of yours going on the tannoy, the speaker system backstage, telling you to get ready as a Womble is fantastic. Hello, my little Wombles. In 5 minutes it'll be curtain up, so you better get dressed.
Thank you very much. Lovely.
There's a bit of impish glee, there's a cheek, there's an honesty, there's a real bubbling energy. The man is so full of energy, but in the end you can't define it. It's simply Bernard Cribbins.
I know for so many people, Bernard Cribbins is a supreme storyteller, a musical comedian, and a very versatile character actor. In the first programme, we heard how his career started at Oldham Repertory Theatre, of his time in the Parachute Regiment, his first West End role in 1956, his early film career, and of course the huge success of the 2 songs recorded in the early 1960s for Parlophone, Hole in the Ground and Right Said Fred.
Right said Fred, both of us together, one each end and steady as we go. Tried to shift it, couldn't even lift it. We was getting nowhere, and So we had a cup of tea and right said...
Bernard, how did these two songs come about?
I was doing a review at the Fortune Theatre called And Another Thing, and I had a song in that called Folk Song, which was a silly yokel thing, which I did with a big flower and counted off the days of the week on this thing. George Martin was then A&R man for Parlophone, and part of his job was to go around West End musical shows, reviews, etc., and if possible, he would then record stuff from the show. Anyway, he came to see our show, decided to record Folk Song and another one for the B-side. Folk Song, A-side, sold, I don't know, quite a lot in a couple of weeks. Parlophone thought, hello, we've got something here, and asked for something else. Ted Dixon, Miles Rudge, then wrote Hole in the Ground, followed by Right Said Fred, and that was it.
Well, before I was in Abbey Road with the Beatles, I was in Abbey Road with Bernard Cribbins in 1962. I would be recording these comedians. Peter Sellers, of course, was the most famous, Spike too, and of course Bernie. And Bernie was the easiest to work with, and he was a natural. I loved making his records. With him, he had a delightful kind of style, and when you listened to a Bernard Cribbins record, you felt better for it. It buoyed you up.
Well, there we were discussing this hole in the ground. So big and sort of round it was, it's not there now. The ground's all flat, and beneath it is the bloke in the bowler hat. And that's that.
And he was wonderful. He was so kind and helpful to someone who'd never recorded before, saying, just pull back a bit on that and can you come in a bit closer? You know, it was technique I was being taught at the same time, which was lovely. Hole in the Ground was actually chosen by Noel Coward when he did Desert Island Discs. And then at the end of the programme, Roy Plumley says, if you could only take one record, which would you take? And apparently the master said, oh, I would take Mr. Cribbins singing Hole in the Ground. Why is that? He said, well, I could walk up and down the beach translating it into French. I never met the gentleman, but I would love to have said thank you very much for giving us a plug. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
But why no more? I mean, you would have thought with those two and Gossip Calypso, that would have been a whole new side to the career.
The rock and roll thing came in with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all the rest of the guys, you know. And the whole music scene just sort of shifted, that was all. And the funny comedy records became not as popular, that's all, or were overshadowed by the others. Yeah.
Now, I suppose most people will always remember you for Jackanory. This seemed to be almost the seat you could sit in with absolute comfort and just tell stories.
I loved it. I used to love doing Jackanory. People, I mean, other actors used to say, how do I get on to doing Jackanory? Prince Charles did one. He rang me up and he said, how do I get on Jackanory? And I told him, I said, just send me a few quid and you'll be on there, governor. And I was very, very fortunate. I had wonderful stories to read. Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, Arabella and her Raven, that, you know, all those. I was really very, very lucky with some wonderful tales to tell.
Arabelle was little and fair, with grey eyes. She was wearing a white nightdress that made her look like a lampshade with 2 feet sticking out from the bottom.
What's the matter, Ma?
She said.
There's a great awful bird in the fridge, sobbed Mrs. Jones, and it's eaten all the cheese and a blackcurrant tart and 5 pints of milk and a bowl of dripping and a pound of sausages. All that's left is the lettuce. Then we'll have lettuce for breakfast, said Arabelle.
Of course, your work on Jackanory really was listened to by whole generations of actors who were still inspired by your ability to bring a story to life, and one of those was David Tennant.
Yeah.
There were lots of people who presented Jackanory, apparently, but I only really remember Bernard doing it. I mean, he was on it a lot. I think he holds a record. And if you have the great privilege of meeting Bernard in life, he will spin a yarn and tell stories sort of all day, and it's never tiresome. You only ever want to hear more. But he's worked with them all, so he can tell you about Hitchcock and Peter Sellers and David Niven. He can spin a yarn and tell these wonderful stories in life and, of course, on screen.
When you're recording those, do you have an imaginary person the other side of the mic?
No, what I always did in my mind, you're reading from autocue, which is shown on the screen, so you look straight through that, and I would isolate in my mind one child, and I am talking to that child. And that's it, basically. You can just concentrate on that one person.
One character I think everybody loves universally is Albert Perks in The Railway Children.
Yeah, it did work very, very well. And it was totally sentimental and of its type and of its time. It was lovely.
And it was directed by your old friend Lionel Jeffries.
Right, you can tell me what you mean by it. Had I ever complained to you of being short as you start this charity with me?
We thought you'd be so pleased, Mr. Perks. I'll never try and be kind to anyone else as long as I live.
We thought you'd love it. They're from all sorts of people in the village.
And who put them up to it, I'd like to know?
He did.
Was that Jenny Agutter's first job? Or
No, she'd stripped naked in some other film. Didn't do it in our film. I don't know why. It would have been probably a different certificate, wouldn't it?
He has the responsibility of an adult and the imagination of a child, which is not limited. And that's actually something that Edith Nesbit would have delighted in, because that's the ideal, to be able to grow up, keep your imagination with you, take responsibility, but still have that way of looking at the world where everything is just new and fresh and exciting. And I think that that's what he also has to offer, is that nothing's ever stale. He seems always to be enjoying new projects, new ideas. He's eternally young because he's always looking forward to things. That's an extraordinary thing to be around, and also it imbues his work with something very special.
The Wombles, of course, directed by Ivor Wood, were also very special.
This is the home of the Wombles. And there's great Uncle Bulgaria.
Get wombling, young Wombles. There's nothing like work to keep you young and fit.
Did he say keep fit? Yeah. Well, come on then. Let's go and do it.
Now, the Wombles, this was another range
Don't
of voices.
start on the Wombles.
Now,
please.
Where did you find all that range?
They were actually very easy to find. The writing was such that I almost knew immediately I read it what they would sound like, because Elizabeth Beresford, bless her, had written Uncle Bulgaria, for instance. He's in charge of the borough, so he's the great avuncular or head of the clan or whatever, so you can make him a bit like that. The next one down was Tobermory, who was like the sergeant major, the foreman, so, oi, you, over here, you know what I mean? He's bossy and very efficient. And then you got the lower orders, like Orinoco, who was the skiver, and he's the one the kids all loved, because he used to sort of skive off and go and have a little munch of something, There was a rather sad one. Tomsk was the sort of muscular one.
Yeah.
If they wanted something heavy moved, they got Tomsk in. And we got to about, 30 or 40 episodes in, and I'd listened to the previous episodes to pick up the voices when I'd gone in to record the next session. And I found that Tomsk had regressed somewhat. Instead of being just sort of a bit quiet like that, he got all like that, boy. And I thought, oh my goodness, we must regenerate him. So we had to sort of kick him around just a little bit, But he'd become a total imbecile who had muscles. It was rather sad. And then Madame Cholet came in, the little French lady. I do believe that she and Uncle Bulgaria were having an affair, but
never to be mentioned.
It was never to be mentioned, not at 20 to 6 of an evening before the watershed and everything.
We've been talking a great deal, really, about the comedy side, about the storytelling side. And we know when you were in Oldham, for example, you played Stanley in Streetcar Named Desire.
Yeah, that's
much
right.
tougher, much heavier roles.
Yeah, proper dramatic piece.
Dramatic stuff. Now, is there a part of you that would like to have done more of that? I mean, I remember again working with you on a play by Wally K. Daly, where you played a very troubled priest, which was a much darker piece. Or again, is it just, I'm a character actor, so
That's
I do it?
That's exactly it, Martin. I'm a character actor. If I'm being a silly old, I nearly said something then, but I won't, a silly old gentleman, then you're a silly old gentleman. But if you're somebody who's got a story to tell that is sad, pathetic, frightened, terrifying, or whatever it is, that's what you do, you use the stuff that the author's given you and put flesh on it. You know, you can get a rubbish script that you've got to do, and you'll do your damnedest with it, but it won't work as well as the one you're talking about, for instance, you know, which is good writing.
And For I Have Sinned definitely was quality writing.
A secret button had been pushed deep inside my being. A button that had triggered a lethal hidden weapon that had been growing there throughout my entire Catholic life. I, too, could have found it in my heart to defend the faith by killing that less-than-human creature that would have destroyed it. I didn't kill him, but I could have done. I could have done.
I remember the most memorable story he told that I was falling about with laughter concerned Tommy Cooper while waiting for D-Mob and standing guard at midnight. But the point is, I'm not going to tell you the story because it's quite the funniest story of Tommy Cooper I've heard, and it's Bernard's story. So next time we see him, say, tell us a Tommy Cooper story that Wally Craig went on about.
This was Tommy Cooper in the army. I think he was in the Welsh Fusiliers. Anyway, the story was that he was on guard in the middle of the night. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning or something, and he drops off for a minute. He closes his eyes and he's gone, and he opens his eyes, and there in front of him is the commanding officer and the sergeant major. And he looks at them, and there's a pause, and he closes his eyes again and says, Amen. And that's it. And I think that is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Caught out, what shall I do? Amen. Sorted. Wonderful. Yeah.
I'm with Bernard Cribbins, and we're talking about his 70 action-packed years in the business.
I like action-packed. Yes. Makes me sound like the Beano.
And, of course, on top of all the stage work, the radio, the television work, you've also done an enormous amount for charity. And I think one of the charities you've supported is Sparks.
It is indeed, yes. I must say that an awful lot of people in show business do an immense amount for charity because you feel you can use your popularity, notoriety, whatever it is, to help to raise funds for whatever charity you have in mind. Sparks I've been involved with for long, 30-something years, I don't know. It stands for Sport Aiding Medical Research for Kids, and that is exactly what happens. And all we do is go out and have a marvellous time playing golf and help to raise these funds. It's terrific.
And it's John Shanley, isn't it,
He's in charge of Sparks at the moment. Yes, he is indeed. Very, very good too. Well done, John.
Bernard is a hunting, shooting, fishing man. I mean, I think that probably stems from his days as a paratrooper. He attends all of the Sparks clay shoots. And whenever I see him, actually, he's always just come back from shooting or fishing somewhere. I think Bernard is very conscious that there are lots of children that won't get the opportunities that he's had to play sport, to take part in sport, and to have a great career like he's had. And the opportunity to use his fame to help people who are less fortunate, I'm sure is foremost in his mind. I think he's one of the kindest men you would ever meet. And actually, his wife Jill is one of the kindest ladies you'll ever meet too. So they're a great pair together.
Jill, you met Bernard in the early 1950s?
Yes, when he came, I went up to Oldham and he was there.
And married in 1955?
Yes.
And did the actual wedding day all go to plan?
No, it was total chaos. Because we had planned to get married. Bernard was then living in digs in London, and we'd planned to get married in the early afternoon, and he suddenly got offered a job by Stuart Burge to go down to Hornchurch and work there. So the actual wedding day, we had to switch to the wedding service to the middle of the morning and then go and have a quick snack my mother had organised for everybody. And then he dashed off and did a matinee.
And has life been like that ever since, in a way?
Absolutely, ever since, yes.
Is Bernard easy to live with? I mean, it's somebody that you both get on extremely well, obviously, but if he's not working or he is working, is he sort of easy to cope with?
I think we're both fairly volatile, actually. So there are moments when sort of sparks fly all over the place, but that's just part of living together, isn't it? And there is a great deal of tension in the job he does. And the fact that the demand is that you get into the West End or wherever you're on tour, and you give 100% of everything you have to produce the best performance you can. So it obviously produces a certain amount of tension, but it's exciting too. It's what we both love. It's a business we both love. We love going to the theatre. We love being part of a theatre.
Bernard, there's something wonderful about playing a role in a perfect musical, and you've done one or two of them.
I've
certainly
done a lot of musicals, yes, for somebody who had no musical training or whatever. No, musicals I absolutely adore. Which one are you thinking about?
I'm thinking about Anything Goes.
Oh, yes.
With Elaine Page.
Elaine Page, I know him, yes. Little fella, yeah, used to be a jockey, yes. Elaine and I had a great time on that. We got on very, very well. She used to come and shoot clay pigeons with us as well. Very good shot for a short person.
You know, in the theatre we all give each other first night gifts, and Bernard's to mine was fish. He gave me carp. 3 huge carp, like huge goldfish, and we named them Reno for the character I played, Moonface after him, and Billy after Billy Crocker. That was Bernard. He's got a great wacky sense of humour. That was one of the most unusual first night gifts. I think probably the most unusual first night gift I've ever been given.
It's quite true that, because she had a goldfish pond in her back garden in Chelsea or somewhere, I think. Didn't have any fish in it, and I thought that was a bit pointless, you know. I think she ate them eventually. Yes, very nice, few chips, and that was it.
And John Barrowman, this was his first job?
It was his first job, yes. He'd been living in America with his parents over there. His father was working in America. There he was, you know, 6 foot tall, gleaming teeth, quite beautiful, and sang very well and leapt about like a good one, and he was off.
I didn't have any family around me or friends. So Bernie kind of took me under his wing, and that, you know, and he started the process of teaching me the old school ways of doing things. Sitting back and watching his comic timing on stage and watching how he did things, and I cherish those because there's so many people nowadays who don't have that old school firm kind of training, and I thank Bernie for it.
I know you once said to me that if there was only one musical that you could have appeared in really for your whole life, it would have been Guys and Dolls, that this gave you the greatest pleasure playing Nathan Detroit at the National Theatre. What was so special?
It wasn't so much the actual musical, the show, although that was, I don't know, 75% of it must be. It was at the National Theatre on the Olivia stage, Richard Eyre directed. It's the most wonderful piece anyway. It's got a great story, a wonderful score, lovely lyrics, and the company that Richard had assembled was one of the best ensemble pieces I've ever been involved with. Nobody messed about. I always said it was like being back in the Paris. Everybody was pointing in the same direction, and it worked every single performance. It was wonderful. And we only did 75, 80 performances, that's all, but it was an absolute joy. I used to run to get there early just to be ready, you know.
What Bernard brought to it was not only his considerable skill and bravura, but he lit up the stage, and his joy at being part of it was so transparent, and it kind of spread throughout the rest of the company. The common misconception about actors, about performers, is that they are show-offs. It's very rare, in the case of the good ones, that that's true. Mostly they're quite shy, they're quite retiring people. Most actors, and Bernie is a perfect example, act because it's a way of vicariously being everything that you aren't. Extrovert and merry and the life and soul of the party.
Is that true? Because you always present such a strong outward personality, but is there still something inside that's a little shy?
I think there probably is, but it probably has become less and less over the years, you know. No, I'm basically noisy now. Yes, rushing about and shouting a lot. And trying to enjoy myself, really, yes.
It seems, Bernard, that in a way the name Bernard Cribbins keeps cropping up generationally. You have the wonderful songs, Right Said Fred.
Yep.
Then it's the Wombles, Jackanory. Then suddenly again we get Doctor Who.
Oh, yes.
One of the great iconic television programmes.
Oh, yes.
And you're the only person to have actually faced the legendary Daleks on both film and television.
That's right, yes, I did Daleks Invade Earth 2015 with Peter Cushing again, and then, of course, I was in recently with David Tennant, as Doctor.
The writer and producer for Doctor Who was Russell T Davies.
He was indeed, yes.
And he created this wonderful, memorable character called
Wilfred Mott, yes, who was the grandfather of Catherine Tate, who became the companion for the Doctor.
There's something of an ideal grandfather about Wilfred, except Bernard's too good an actor to run away with a bland description like that. It's what he brings to it is detail and precision and warmth and depth. And the brilliant thing for me was, and this happens a few times in your career, is you come across actors who you suddenly realise are limitless. And to see Bernard and to realise that he could go anywhere, until eventually we were pushing these scripts into areas where lovable, friendly old Wilfred Mott was watching concentration camps being set up in Great Britain. There were some very, very dark stories. And to give Bernard that and to see him doing the whole range of tragedy and darkness on top of the funny stuff that you knew he could do was such an eye-opener. It was such an education for me. And he can break your heart with a single line. He's absolutely astonishing actor.
Oh, 1948, I was over there. End of the mandate in Palestine. Private Mott. Skinny little idiot I was. Stood on this rooftop in the middle of a skirmish. It's like a blizzard, all them bullets in the air. Yeah, you don't want to listen to an old man's tales, do you?
I'm older than you.
Get away.
I'm 906.
In the scene, there's a lot of Bernard's own war experiences written into the script. So when you hear Will talking about that, it's also Bernard talking about standing on a roof and the shrapnel and the war raging around him. And of course that just adds an extra piquancy to playing those scenes. You just sort of swim in his eyes. There's something heart-stopping about Bernard.
You take this, that's an order, Doctor, take the gun.
Russell T Davies saw all the warmth and all the twinkle that Bernard has, and I think he also saw a very wonderful, rather serious, very moving actor in there too. And I think we were hugely fortunate on Doctor Who that we got to exploit that, and I think perhaps surprise some people with just how good Bernard is.
I know you were very proud when you received your OBE in 2011 for services to drama. Long overdue.
They didn't mention comedy at all, it was just drama, you know.
Yes.
I thought, she saw that one, did she? Yes, all right.
Looking back over the career, do you have any regrets at all? Are there any parts that you would really love to have played?
Oh, goodness gracious, what a question, Martin. There must be, but I can't think of one at the moment, but there must have been times when I thought, wish I could have got a hold of that, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I think years and years and years ago, I would probably like to have tried America, but that didn't happen because I was too busy working half the time. So ducking and diving and doing a bit of this and a bit of that and some of that and some of this, you know, is very useful sometimes. I've enjoyed it very much indeed. I'm still enjoying it.
What do you think your mum and dad would have thought of this little lad from Oldham?
They were very pleased and proud that I was very happy that they'd seen some of the work, you know. They didn't see an awful lot of it because they left us, you know, a long time ago. But I think they did enjoy what they saw, and he has done well. Yeah, that was Ethel.
And you still looking for work, still want the challenges?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, well, I've got a wife and fishing rods to keep, you know what I mean? Yes. No, I enjoy my job, thank goodness, and I've been very fortunate in the jobs that I've had, the work I've done. And I always look forward to the next one, particularly. Yeah, see what happens.
You've given countless millions a huge amount of pleasure.
Could you ask all of them to send me a quid?
Yeah, a lot of money. A lot of money.
Be like the lottery. No, it's been fun, it's been good, and I hope it goes on for a bit longer, certainly.